All right, here we go. Let's count us down in three, two. Fitness Business Podcast family, thank you so much for joining us today. I think you're really going to enjoy our show. Today, I have Jim Zupel with us. He is the Senior Business Facilitator for Battlefield Leadership. Jim, thank you so much for taking time out of your day and coming on to the Fitness Business Podcast to just, talk about Battlefield Leadership.
Yeah, it is my pleasure to be here and to just give a little bit of insight into what we do as an organization and how we really use history's lessons to equip leaders to deal with today's challenges and today's opportunities. And that I'm talking about leaders. It could be fitness industry leaders, it can be business leaders outside of that, it can be any nonprofit organization. Most leadership challenges have a way of repeating themselves, and there's a lot to learn from history. And what we try to do is to take that, what's happening militarily or at these historic sites that we're at, and bring them forward into today's challenges.
Yeah, when you were talking to me before we started recording, and I asked you the simple question of tell me what battlefield leadership is, and you had some really cool little bullet points about it. And I love the one you said, well, we take history and then we take business and you put them together to try to solve problems that occur daily in the business world. And you also said that you feel like you take teams to iconic places and you work through business strategies. And I think it's a really cool concept. And you said, hey, we are a leadership company, but we bring a different approach.
Yeah, and so I mean, think about our industry for a minute. And we don't look at leadership as a competitive advantage. We think it's more important that it's a distinctive advantage, because most competitive advantages can end up being replicated. If you're first in, and that's all because of leadership, you get the high ground. It's a military term we use a lot. But afterwards, anybody generally can replicate most things. Take Planet Fitness, for instance, right? When they came in, they were in something totally new, totally disruptive. Now there are sons and daughters of Planet Fitness all over the place. So the original leadership that brought it in, they have the high ground, but that didn't protect them from other people opening up knockoffs and all those kind of things. So, we look at leadership as something that's far more valuable, a good, solid leadership team, than any competitive advantage you're going to have around new idea, new scale, new something, because all that at the end of the day can end up being replicated. But while you're trying to replicate what they're doing, the great leadership teams are on to the next thing and what that's going to be. So that's why, to us, the whole leadership space is quite frankly more important than anything else that in business takes place.
So one of the things that I think our audience is going to find really interesting about you today is, yes, you're a facilitator for Battlefield Leadership, but you're also a gym owner. So you also understand that side. You're an owner, you're in it, you're working it every day. And I believe your health club is Five Bridges Health and Fitness, located in Mechanicsburg.
Actually, it's in Harrisburg, PA, about 20 miles from there. Yep.
You're from Mechanicsburg, though, right?
Yes. Yeah, we're from Mechanicsburg. And look, the things we deal with here, the things with all of our other fitness industry owners and operators deal with, are no different than what Bank of America deals with. The scale's different, obviously, but Hershey Company, the places that I've worked before. And so, the lessons that we learned from there, the lessons that I've learned that I talk about in our Battlefield programs, the pandemic's the perfect example, right? One of our major teaching points of any program we run is this important subject called assumptions, right? And what assumptions are you making? And I can tell you that when the pandemic hit, we immediately were on a REX Roundtable call in February with operators from China who were beginning to reopen. And the first exercise I took my own team through, so we drink our own Kool-Aid, was an assumptions exercise about what things did we think were going to happen if this came here. And we assumed that virtual would be a big deal. We made an assumption that, based on the early numbers, seniors were going to get harder than other people from the pandemic. They'd be the last ones to come back. And every week we pulled them out to make sure they were still relevant and we were making decisions on them in the right way, in the right fashion. And it led us through the pandemic, along with REX and being able to talk to really smart people everywhere. And, collectively, we worked our way through most of it.
Jim, like I said earlier, I think our FBP family is in for a real treat today. So we're going to get started. And my first question to you is, why does battlefield leadership, why does that interest you?
You know, I mean, so many people are used to their leadership development taking place in a classroom and going to training. And so being out in these iconic locations where history literally was made and being able to debate and explore why decisions were made, why they weren't made, and then drawing the parallel to business today while at these locations. I mean, standing on Omaha Beach, talking about decision making and talking about courage and when we have courage in our business too, it's just at a different level, right? They're talking about a capital C, we're generally talking about a small c, but being in those locations and just feeling that history and then getting a chance to talk about it and making it real for us in business, whether it's in the fitness industry or some other client that we're in. It's what makes what we do maybe a little more unique and so memorable to people. We hear from people 5, 10 years later, and that's the best training I've ever been through. And I don't know so much that it's the training itself, it's the whole experience of being in these places and seeing what happened and going back and reflecting on that. And then it comes great perspective for people when they're thinking about their challenges, going like, man, if they can run across that beach at Omaha, I can certainly deal with this problem employee or this problem member or whatever it might be.
Yeah, and you mentioned Omaha Beach. And one thing I just want to get clear is battlefield leadership takes place at a variety. I think you told me what was it, 20 some sites that you go around to. Am I correct?
Yeah, we're in the 30s now, and we're in a variety of different places for a lot of reasons. Sometimes geographically, it makes it easier for people to come. Other times, the scale of it, if we're working with large international companies, they'll gravitate toward a Normandy because it was a world war, right? With all the strategic alliances that are taking place between the U.S. and the British and the French and all these things, they can relate to that in business, with the alliances that they have. Not all of our programs are battlefield. We sometimes will find ourselves at the Henry Ford Museum talking about innovation, at Kitty Hawk with the Wright brothers talking about innovation there and the failure to commercialize it and why was that and how do we ensure that doesn't happen to us. But yeah, we go to a lot of different locations for a host of reasons. And some of the battles are Civil War, some are American Revolution, some are World War II, variety of different fields and experiences. We have some clients that come back and go to 2, 3, 4. I mean, with the REX Roundtables, we started at Gettysburg, but I've had a bunch of them go out to Little Bighorn at Custer's Last Stand and everything, and different characters, different battles, different competitors. So every one of them is different enough that we have repeat customers coming to us, sometimes 5, 6 years running.
Well, that's really cool. So I love our next question because I think it's really relevant because all of our listeners, their background, some of them are coming to one man show business, some of them are, a 10 employee fitness business, and then there's obviously some of our listeners are from the big box gyms. How do you take the battlefield leadership and kind of get it to relate to any size fitness business?
Yeah, well, one of the things and how we run our business when we have people in front of us, we're always very cognizant of what we call three tiers of influence, right? So our first and foremost focus is on the people right in front of us and giving them tips, techniques, frameworks to make them more effective leaders. That's goal number one. Generally, they're an intact team of some particular way, shape, or form. So the second thing we're doing is working with them on team dynamics. We get clients coming to us that really are so good at a team that we worry about they've got groupthink and they all think the same way and they won't challenge each other. Then on the other spectrum, we've got the real dysfunctional teams where trust is not high, and we love them all, right? So there's the same team element, which is second. Then the third level is their overall enterprise. When you talk about some of the big box gyms or larger clients we have, if we can make the individuals and the teams better, we know we're having a positive influence on the overall enterprise. So it doesn't really matter how big a client is when they come to us because we've always got that core of working with individual leaders and making them better, if that makes sense.
It makes perfect sense. Now, I know that you've taken numerous REX Roundtable groups to Gettysburg to explore battlefield leadership, and that's actually on the battlefield. So, what impact do you feel that it makes on the learning lessons when you're on the battlefield?
Well, First off, it makes it very real for people. I mean, we can sit in a classroom and talk about Omaha Beach. That does nothing like standing there and understanding low tide. They've got 400 yards of beach to go across, and you can put yourself, literally feel yourself in the position that the leaders are there at that particular point in time working their way through. So I think more than anything, it's being on the field. And during the pandemic, when no one would travel, we were doing podcasts and webinars and all those things. And we got good feedback on them, but the energy level is just different, right? You can't replicate being at these locations in these particular places, because then you can see how high the hill was. You can see how far the beach was. And that just brings context and perspective that I don't care how good you are trying to explain it. Imagine this. It's not like being there and looking at it and going, holy Sierra, man, this is a big deal.
Right, right. So what kind of response have you gotten from some of the members of REX Roundtables when you're there on the battlefield?
Most people, and this just isn't REX either, most people say it's the best leadership experience they've ever had. And I don't say that necessarily because of the facilitators or the military historians. That obviously that's part of it, but it's how that it all plays out with the location that we're at, what happened there, the importance of what happened there, and then all the leadership things that took place, the decisions made or not made, strategies formulated or not formulated. And we could sit and just talk about them on and on about, I mentioned before this idea about assumptions and what they made. I mean, one of the key things that made D-Day work at Normandy was the fact that the Germans were making an assumption that the landing would take place at the Pas de Calais, because logically that was the shortest distance across the channel. It had a major port there. They never thought that the Allies were building portable harbors that they could come on any beach, put them in the water, and feed tanks and supplies inland after that. And those assumptions then dictated where they put their resources and all those things. So when D-Day happens, a lot of their defenses are set up in a place built on a faulty set of assumptions.
How high do the emotions run? I know I don't want this to sound like the last question I just asked you, but do you have a lot of people that end up getting very emotional?
I think a lot of people, you see them, they've got this look in their eyes, right? First off, a lot of them had people who have fought in some of these things, right? Especially with World War II, a great grandfather and all those kind of things. A great great granddaddy fought it, the Battle of Antietam, or something along those lines. So there's that connection, right? And then there's always this patriotic element of it, right? That these people they're dying for our freedom, right? They're dying for a very, very noble cause. And that cause in many respects is us, right? And the sacrifices that they've ended up making. So not so much emotion like you would think, sobbing and those kinds of things, but a lot of time you just see people reflecting. They're just looking at something and they're not with you right now. And that's really a good thing, because they're out there someplace that they couldn't get to if we weren't on the battlefield. If I was talking about this in a classroom, they'd never find that place.
Yeah, I think I probably would be the emotional mess, because I don't know. I just like to connect to things. And I can imagine that going to Normandy Beach, I've seen enough movies, that I know they're just movies, but still that, I get the gist of the impact that Normandy Beach could have. And I probably would be the one, you'd have to console me a little.
Yeah.
All right, enough about me. I can imagine you would have multiple different leadership lessons from battlefields from all over the world. If you had to pick your top 3 lessons that you think are, like most relevant to leading a fitness business or leading fitness professionals, what are your top 3 lessons?
Yeah. My guess is that some of the REX groups that have been through my programs could probably almost answer this question that I'm going to give you. They would get 2 out of 3 probably right, because there are some we talk about at every battlefield because they're always relevant. The first one I would say is just, as a leader, understanding your hallway reputation. Now, what do I mean by that? What I mean by that is, what do people think about you when they see you coming down the hallway? Do they see you as a good team player, someone that's trustworthy? They can't wait to work with you. They'll break down walls for you, or the exact opposite of that. You're dumber than a bag of hammers. They can't trust you. you're not a good team player, you're in it for yourself. All those things dictate how well they work with you, how well they don't work with you, and everything. So exploring and getting into and uncovering blind spots that you have, and we all have them, right? We and I go through exercises with this with the people that are there. That's number one, right? Because that is you as a leader, and it speaks volumes about who you are, what your character is, what your courage is, what your competence is. We call them the 3 C's of battlefield leadership. So first off is your hallway reputation. Second, I then take it from the individual leader to the business side, but it's driven by leaders, and that is what I mentioned previously. What assumptions are you making about your business right now? You're making them, but are you writing them down? Are you pulling them out periodically, looking at them to make sure they're still relevant and loud? Or are you going to be totally blindsided by, if you're taxi cab industry with Uber, you're hoteling and it's Airbnb, all the warning signs are out there that a competitive threat could be coming, but you're not connecting the dots in any way, shape, or form. So I always like to say we all under the same sky, but as leaders, we all have a different horizon in terms of how far we're willing to look out. So the second one would be this notion about assumptions and making sure you and your team talk about what they are, and then you pull them out once a quarter to make sure, are they still relevant? Is there any we need to add? Is there any we need to take away? And then the last one is what I call the mindset of a leader. That is, I don't care what you do. Let's say you're a fitness owner, right? If you look at the world through the eyes of just a fitness owner, you're going to miss a lot. What I mean by that is, I think you ought to think about yourself as a leader first, a broad-based business person second, who happens to be a fitness owner, right? One of the things I love about the industry roundtable that I'm on with Rex is that we constantly are visiting non-fitness related businesses, trying to learn from them, right? And this group of people, these people are business people first, fitness operators second, and first and foremost leaders. If you can flip that narrative and see the world through that lens, you have a much broader perspective. You're less likely to get surprised by something, and many times you're more likely to be on the front end of things as opposed to being totally reactive to them.
Okay. Do you have any other key points that you want to go over that maybe?
Well, I think that in terms of key takeaways, okay, like things that people can look to do, right? One is be very intentional about your hallway reputation. It's not what you think it is; it's about what other people think you are, right? And go seek out blind spots, right? I've been doing this for a long, long time, and I went through an exercise with my team, and they came back with feedback to me that I was unapproachable. And I thought, what are you talking about? I've been doing leadership development, executive training for, 2.5 decades. What they said was all those things that made up my hallway reputation: being driven, being intense, being a risk taker, and a decision maker. All those things had a message when I walked into the club that I'm too busy for all that small stuff. Don't bother me. And it was a total blind spot to me. And so now every time when I walk into one of the clubs, I open the door, the last thing I'm thinking about is be approachable, right? And no matter what's happening, come into the club, get behind the front desk, talk to the team for a second, and work your way through it and manage your reputation, right? The second thing I would say is that leadership is a skill. It's not something we're born with, right? And so it's no different than wanting to learn how to play a piano. What things would you do if you wanted to get better at a piano? Well, you'd maybe get a coach. You maybe would buy a piano. You would practice. All those things are the same as leadership, right? Leadership, you can get better at it. The only trait that I've ever seen in all really great leaders that I worked around is they made a conscious decision that they wanted to be a great leader, and they did the work, right? They went to work and they got better at it. And lastly is this notion of every day reflecting on how you spent your 24 that day. I mean, think about this. At the end of the day, we have the same hours in a day that Churchill had, that Martin Luther King had, that Gandhi had. These people changed world history in the same amount of time that we have every day. So are you spending your 24 every day in a way that when you measure your life, back to the book I recommended, you're going to accomplish the things you want? I mean, something as simple as social media, 2 hours a day, that's over 600 hours a year. What would you do with that from a pure value standpoint around affecting positive change if you spent that time doing that? I'm not anti-social media. I'm just saying everything has its place, and we've got so much time here, and it's such a gift that we should be very, very conscious and intentional about how we use it.
All right, that was awesome. I love that last social media piece. That was a good reminder. Jim, you got me hooked. I'm ready to sign up. So, can you tell myself, as well as all of our FBP family out there listening, if they want to be a part of this program, how do they sign up? Do you have to be in a team? Can you come as an individual? How does that work?
Yeah, well, number one, if you have a team and you're interested, you can always go to battlefieldleadership.com and there's an inquiry page that you fill out. We're all familiar with that. Number one. Number two, I'm a friend of the industry. James.zuppel@battlefieldleadership.com. You can go through me. I'll make sure you get to the right place. If you're an individual or even your family, you're interested, we do periodically run open enrollment programs. Now, in those programs, and I always like to be very transparent, there's generally not as much of a business piece because people are coming for the history. So like over the 4th of July in 2023, we will be doing an open enrollment Normandy program. And I'll be at that program. Our CEO will be at that program. And we have some other members of our team. And anybody can go to that, right? They just go out, they fill out the information, they get comfortable with, whatever the expense is. We stay at a great place at the Le Chenevier, which is in just off of the beaches at Normandy. And it's an amazing experience. And we'll do the same thing at Gettysburg from time to time. So we do have these open enrollment programs. So literally 2 avenues to get to know us, right? Teams, you can go to the website, you can go through me, or if it's one of those things that you're just curious and that you got a very strong interest in history and military history and those things, then we do have some open enrollment programs. Once again, you can go to the website or come through me and I can let you know what's on the docket with regard to those.
So I understand Normandy. I'm sure that's a much longer attendance period. But if you did like one at Gettysburg or one of the other, smaller trips, how many days do you have to give up to for the program? Is it 2
Yeah,
weeks?
normally how it ends up working is for our open enrollment programs, you would come in on an evening, let's say Monday night, and 5:30 we'd have a social hour. There'd be a strategic overview that night around, okay, what led us to this point? If it's the Civil War or World War II. So strategic overview for about an hour. After that, we'd spend the entire next day in the battlefield, going to all these different iconic stops. Everybody would get a participant manual with case studies in it. They're only about 2 pages long, so they're really simple reads. But we have a nice dialogue. So it's not just us talking at you. It's like, hey, I read this about this person. So there's this discussion going on. Social hour, dinner again that night. Next day, we spend a half day and we're done. So literally it's a 3-day calendar period, but only about a day and a half with us.
Oh, perfect. Okay, excellent. So anybody out there listening, if you want to entertain the idea of maybe taking your team, for a retreat with a battlefield leadership, please, we will have all of Jim's contact information in our show notes. And you can take a look for yourself. But yeah, sign me up, Jim. I would love to do this. Sounds like a great concept.
Well, we would love to see you and others there. And again, I don't think there's a lot of guarantees in life, but we really feel pretty confident that people that come through our programs not just leave with a lot of leadership takeaways, but they will experience something that they won't soon forget.